The attacks on Paris, Lebanon, Tunisia and Iraq across November of 2015 has thrust the world into an atmosphere of terror and fear. But what is Britain doing to protect itself from terrorism? The PREVENT strategy is the government's leading anti-terrorism policy. PREVENT aims to stop individuals vulnerable to radicalisation by catching those at risk before they've become extremists. This involves doctors, teachers, bosses, you and me contacting PREVENT if we suspect someone of being a terrorist. PREVENT is just one of 4 main anti-terrorism policies from the government. That includes Pursue, the overall aim to stop terrorism, Protect, which calls for a strengthened protection against a terrorist attack, and Prepare, which mitigates the impact of a terrorist attack. But how do we spot a terrorist? The British Muslim community think that they are being stigmatised by PREVENT, as the government has been targeting mosques and Muslim areas specifically across the UK. What does David Cameron say to this?
The world is not conspiring against Islam. The security services aren't behind terrorist attacks. Our new PREVENT duty for schools is not about criminalising or spying on Muslim children. This is paranoia in the extreme. In fact, that duty will empower parents and teachers to protect children from all forms of extremism, whether Islamist extremism or neo-Nazi extremism.
I went to a Muslim Council of Britain conference to speak to Muslim news journalist Rashan Mohammed Salih to discuss PREVENT in more detail.
Well, I just think the PREVENT strategy is a massive spying operation ultimately on the Muslim community. It targets the Muslim community disproportionately to the threat which does exist. Also, it's enacted by a government which is ideological in its agenda, doesn't really understand the Muslim community, doesn't really understand the causes of radicalisation and terrorism even, but instead wants to impose its version of what it thinks the problem is on the community. So ultimately, if you want to stop bombs going off on trains and buses like happened on 7/7, you need to listen to the people from that community and empower them to tackle the issue. So it's a self-defeating policy. It's also a policy which ignores the main causes of radicalisation. The main one is foreign policy. When Muslims see their own government attacking other Muslim countries, like happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, and now Syria, that makes them extremely angry, and that makes them prone to radicalisation and extremism. It makes them hate their own country. The second cause of radicalisation would be Islamophobia and racism, which we're subject to every day, and you'll only know that if you're a Muslim or a brown person. White people don't understand that because they're not subject to it, they're not victims of it. And this is, I'm sorry to talk directly, but this is the truth. The media is extremely Islamophobic. It's a point which is never addressed. They're allowed to just say whatever they want about Muslims and link any negative thing to the Muslim community.
Whenever you target a minority, whenever you make people feel that they are questioned on their practices, their beliefs, and anything that they say might be taken in a way to write up a file or report them as ready to be radicalized, becomes something scary, because those people will turn to alternative channels to express their views, to voice their concerns, and that is something we don't want to do.
We feel like we're a target community. We feel alienated from the mainstream. We feel that the media doesn't represent us. We feel that politicians doesn't represent us, and that's a very dangerous thing to happen. There are 3 million Muslims in Great Britain. We are part of this society. We are British citizens like everyone else. Yet it's extremely dangerous when you have a large minority like that feeling alienated from British society and British media and the British mainstream, and it can only go down extremely bad avenues.
I think there's many who are so scared, and I try to say that you're not seeing what's happening inside Muslim families today. What's happening is that parents are warning their children to watch out. The teachers are spying on them. The nurses and doctors are spying on their patients, and that's a scary atmosphere to create, because especially with children, with youngsters, with youth in general, the the area and the space of discussion that's ongoing in their self is huge. And if you don't discuss it with those people who are there to educate you, who are you going to discuss it with? What we're going to create is an underground kind of thought channel that we cannot voice in our classrooms, at universities, and I think that is going to really push towards extremism.
So are there any advantages to Prevent? To investigate, I spoke to Abdul Azim Ahmed, Assistant Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Wales.
When it was first launched, Muslim communities were so shocked and so appalled by how backwards, draconian and counterproductive the Prevent policy was. They said, we're not going to engage, we're going to boycott this policy. And there was a very significant boycott. No mainstream Muslim organizations engaged Prevent. In retrospect, I don't think that was the right decision, because what it simply meant was that there was this money on the table for delivering counter-extremism projects. If the mainstream Muslim organizations weren't touching it, there were other fringe organizations which would, and delivered very counterproductive programs. And it simply, I think, exacerbated how bad Prevent was. So you had the wrong policies, you had the wrong approach delivered by the wrong people. I think there's been a slight shift. I think Muslim organizations have now started to think, well, we have to start engaging, because otherwise we're the ones who are most at risk. We're starting to see some very positive projects come out of it. We're starting to see Prevent delivered with some degree of competency, with some awareness of the nuances of radicalisation.
But what do Rashan, Ragad and Abdul offer as a solution to Prevent?
Ultimately, the solution to so-called Muslim Islamic extremism lies in the Muslim community itself. They are the only ones that can get to the few youth, especially, who may be prone to radicalisation.
We have to do something about it and do it in the right way. Dialogue, discussion, encouragement, getting together, listening to the people and trying to change something about the way things are being done.
Go right back to the basics. Bring the stakeholders who have got some involvement in preventing violent extremism and have a discussion about how best to prevent violent extremism.
Maybe improving Prevent begins with listening to the British communities at the heart of the issue.